Hello, everybody. It's Eric Lee here with Equity Real Estate and Elite Agent Training. And I've had several requests recently. In fact, I just got off the call with one of my own agents, but I had some requests from some of our brokers to do a quick training on the time clause addendum. We're in a shifting market right now, and a lot of our agents don't know how to. We've been having it where it was so easy for the sellers, and now it's getting easier for the buyers. And so we need to learn some new forms a little bit better that we haven't needed to really know and understand a lot in the last couple of years. All right. So here's the first form that usually brings up the time clause addendum. So we're going to go over the subject to sell of buyer's property addendum. In the past couple of years with a hot market, buyers haven't really been able to make offers subject to the sale of their home because it gave them a pretty substantial backseat, so to speak, to the other offers that they were competing against. But let's go over this one. So first of all, if I do have a buyer now, these things are being considered legitimately by sellers. They're anxious to get their home sold, and they know they might need to work with a buyer a little bit more. So I want to make an offer, but I need to sell my buyer's property first in order to qualify for the loan. A couple things that are really important here, especially if you're an experienced agent, okay? Because in the past, this subject to sell of buyer's property addendum had its own deadlines. Okay, those are gone now, and we're going to be going off of the deadlines in the purchase contract itself. So we have a right to cancel before the due diligence or financing and appraisal deadline, whichever is later. Now you might be thinking, why would they say either or? Because isn't the financing and appraisal deadline always later? Well, in the case of a cash offer, we're not going to have a financing and appraisal deadline. We're just going to have a due diligence deadline. So if my client can sell their home, they're intending to buy this new home with all cash, and these other deadlines wouldn't matter. So that's why we have these two deadlines. Typically, though, if there's any financing, then it's going to be based off of the financing and appraisal deadline. So as a buyer, when I'm writing this offer, I need to make sure in the purchase contract that my finance and appraisal deadline is pushed back far enough in order to allow me the time that I think I'm going to need to get the buyer's home sold. Okay, so that's the first important thing. Now, what about the other deadlines? We've got our seller disclosure deadline. That shouldn't be any different. They should be able to have those disclosures to us within a couple of days. My due diligence deadline, I should get my due diligence done within the first week or two. Okay. Now, again, if this is a cash buyer, then I'm going to need to push that due diligence deadline out and give me enough time to sell my home. But if I'm going off the finance and appraisal deadline, I should get the first two things done, the seller's disclosures and the due diligence. I should get those done quickly because there's no reason to string a seller out if I know after my inspections that I don't want to buy this home. Okay. So the first two deadlines will be normal. Finance and appraisal deadline needs to be pushed back long enough that I think I can get the home sold. If, and then we've got this buyer may cancel in buyer's sole discretion if they haven't closed on the sale of their property by providing written notice to the seller no later than the due diligence deadline or the financing and appraisal deadline, whichever is later, and the earnest money will be returned to them. If they cancel after that deadline, okay, and they haven't closed on the sale of their property, then they can still cancel prior to the settlement deadline by providing that written notice, and then the earnest money will be released. Now, the reason this is important to understand is this is not considered a default, okay? So the seller agrees to accept as seller's exclusive remedy the earnest money deposit as liquidated damages. Whereas if you go and look at the default section of the real estate purchase contract, a default gives the other party three different options. Collecting the earnest money as damages is only one of those three options. So again, they can cancel prior to that financing and appraisal deadline, get their earnest money back. They can cancel after the financing and appraisal deadline, but prior to settlement and lose their earnest money, but it's not a default. If they did default, then the other party would have those other options available to them to pursue as well. All right. Now, whether or not the property is or isn't listed, and if it isn't listed, then it will be listed within 7 days by this brokerage, etc. Okay. Or whether or not it's under contract. So that part's pretty good. So as a buyer, we've made this offer. Now, as a seller, how do we want to counter this? Okay, let's say that the buyer has given themselves 2 months to get their other property sold. Well, what if I get a cash offer tomorrow that can perform right away? I don't want to necessarily pass that up, but at the same time, I don't want to reject this offer because I may not get a cash offer. I may not get any other offers, and this may be the best one that comes along. So I want to accept this offer with the subject to sell a buyer's property contingency. However, I want to leave the door open a little bit for me to continue to market the home. And if I do get a better offer that doesn't have those contingencies, then my seller will have the ability to go with that. That's where this form comes in right here. So we got the option to keep property on market, time clause addendum. So let's look down here at these sections here. First of all, buyer and seller agree that the seller may continue to offer the property for sale and to accept any backup offer. So if I didn't counter with this addendum, I could accept backup offers, but they wouldn't be able to move into first position because I didn't use this. All right. So we can always accept backup offers, but this is going to go a little bit step further. So this says that I can continue to offer it and I can accept backup offers, and seller in their sole discretion may notify the buyer in writing of an accepted backup offer. So if this is a backup offer that I really like and I want to trigger this time clause, then I can do so by notifying the buyer in writing. So if the seller does provide this written notice to the buyer, then the buyer shall have, and usually I'll put in 3 days in here, but you could do 24 hours or 1 day. It's negotiable. Let's say I do 3 days in here. After receipt of seller's written notice, to provide written notice to seller of buyer's removal of the following conditions. So in other words, the buyer made the offer subject to sell. The seller then counters with this and says, if we do get a good backup offer and we notify you in writing, it triggers this clause that you then have 3 days to remove your contingency. So again, if it's a due diligence contingency, then we would check that one. If it's an appraisal contingency, we would check this. And if it's a financing or subject to sell a buyer's property condition, then we can check that one. Okay. Now, in addition to removing the above check conditions, so let's say that I'm the buyer and I haven't sold my home yet. Well, I'm not going to be able to just remove this contingency and go ahead and perform in time. So I'm going to need to let the other offer that's come in backup position, they're going to need to be able to move into first position. Okay. So if I don't remove from the real estate purchase contract the above check condition within the time specified, that 3 days, then the REPC will automatically become canceled, in which instance my earnest money deposit as a buyer comes back to me. Okay. I wasn't able to perform, but I'm not going to get penalized for that. Because the seller's going to be moving on and taking an offer that works better for them. So I'll get my earnest money back. However, if I am able to perform here, I can do that. And we can also negotiate as a seller that, hey, if you're going to perform, then we want a little bit more skin in the game too. So we want you to put in an extra little bit of earnest money, and it'll be deposited into the same location as where our initial earnest money deposit went. So hopefully this makes sense to you. And if you have any questions on this, please remember to talk to your broker. Thank you.